Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Sonic the Hedgehog here, aka the Blue Blur, aka Blue Justice, and I am back for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Sonic Rush for the Nintendo DS. So, last time, we've essentially did manage to fully complete Sonic's story by going into the 7th zone, which appears to be Deadline, and on top of that, we have a one-on-one fight against with the forms of Blaze the Cat, and in addition to that though, is about the fact that we somehow claim ourselves the 7th and the final Chaos Emerald in the hardest special stage in the entire game, just like the forms of how it does it on any other Sonic games, including Sonic Advance 2, as well as Sonic Advance 3, so yeah, you might able to actually notice about this fact. And in addition to that though, is about the fact that we somehow managed able to take on the final zone in Sonic's story, and that's what appears to be known as Unknown. And as a result, we did somehow manage to able to finish off the forms of Eggman Nega, well, at least for the time being anyway. So anyway, today for this video is about the fact that we're about to be continue playing through Sonic Rush, and because of that, we're about to jump right into the second half of the entire playthrough. And because of that, we're going to be playing as Blaze the Cat here. So because of that though, as far as I'm aware, is about the fact that the entire structure when it comes to Blaze the Cat plays pretty much exactly like the forms of how it does it in Sonic's story, but there's one key difference, or actually couldn't think about it, there's actually technically two key factors that we want to point out, is that once you're able to play as Blaze right here, basically though is about the fact that, as you can see, we ended up in a world map screen from the start, because unlike in Sonic's story, you're able to actually jump right into the very first level in the game immediately. So because of that though, and also something's worth noting for, is that certain zones are in a different order. So something tells me is about the fact that the first zone we can able to come across into in Blaze the Cat's playthrough, and that's what appears to be Night Carnival. And as far as I'm aware, is that I believe the third zone, as well as Zone 7, is pretty much unchanged when it comes to the forms of certain zones, but then again though, we'll get to more details on that particular topic once we're able to actually continue proceedings into Blaze the Cat's playthrough. So because of that though, and also, if you couldn't tell from the top screen right here, is that as you can tell, we are no longer going to be collecting Chaos Emeralds because that was only for Sonic. So instead, Blaze the Cat's objective is to able to collect all 7 of the Soul Emeralds. And how do we get them exactly? Well, then again though, we'll get into more details about that if we jump right into her gameplay style in the forms of Sonic Rush. So because of that though, even though the entire map itself is basically exactly identical to Sonic's playthrough, except like I said before, that certain zones are in a different order, which you'll see why during at some point in the next couple of days in between, you know what I'm saying, with the forms of Fridays, Mondays, and Wednesdays essentially. So either way though, let's jump right into the first zone in Blaze the Cat's playthrough in Sonic Rush. So because of that though, here we go on to Night Carnival, and as far as I'm aware, is about the fact that the actual level design is basically identical to Sonic's playthrough, except the fact that there's one noticeable difference you might able to realize about something, is that, do you guys even remember that, as I said this before, that Blaze the Cat, that she's the only one that she's not going to able to experiencing the special stages, because only Sonic can. So because of that though, take this part for instance, there's no special generator on the bottom screen right now, because as far as I'm aware, is that, like I said earlier, that Blaze cannot experience the special stage basically. So either way though, yeah, that's what I can really say about that, I guess. So anyway, a few things I want to talk about is, in regards to the forms of today's discussion, is about the fact that, well, today's date of course there is the 15th of May today, in some cases in 2024 today, and I kind of believe about the fact that I believe we've almost there to the halfway point in terms of the forms of in May already, before we move on to the 6th month, which appears to be June. So as a result, no matter what though, I believe we've only got about exactly, if I recall correctly, actually, kind of think about it though, I know it's been quite some time since we actually mentioned something like this, but apparently though, is about the fact that, well, suffice to say, that we've only got about 2 more days to go, until My Little Pony Sephiroth Heights Mystery is going to be releasing, and on top of all that stuff though, we've only got about exactly 8 days to go now until Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Switch Remake is definitely getting closer. So because of that though, still I'm basically excited for it. It's a shame about the fact that I can't seem to able to actually get the pre-order bonus item somewhere in Journey Forms within my Nintendo store, because I was originally trying to able to actually, access the forms of the My Nintendo store, but instead I ended up choosing Amazon, just like the forms of how it does it for the majority of those Nintendo Switch games that I somehow pre-ordered and all that stuff. So because of that though, speaking of something Nintendo Switch related though, is about the fact that out of nowhere, ever since In Journey Falls have been a couple of days ago, or should I say it's been a week ago actually, that out of nowhere, that it looks like there's gonna be the very first-party Nintendo game has finally been announced. Journey Falls have been the second half, Eternity Falls have been 2024. And was it a brand new game? Well, it's almost a brand new game, but to be more specifically, a yet another compilation game. Except this time, it plays very similar to the forms of how it does it back in the Wii U, for not only for NES Remakes 1, but also with NES Remakes 2 as well. And what that game in questioning, you may ask? Well, this new game is gonna called Nintendo World Championships NES Edition for the Nintendo Switch. So no matter what though, is about the fact that, well, I was quite pleasantly surprised whenever I first saw that particular announcement trailer for that particular game I was on about earlier. Well, as it turns out, it's about the fact that it's been 7 years ago since that Nintendo did Nintendo World Championships ever since back in 2017. So yes, it's been quite a long time, hasn't it? Especially concerning for the fact that I'm almost assuming about the fact that it's going to take place in somewhere in the actual main event, or specifically on the hands-on event, but as it turns out, that's most likely going to be taking place on your Nintendo Switch itself this time around. So because of that though, and as far as I'm aware, is that it's going to be releasing until exactly 2 months from now. So as a result, no matter what though, it's going to be releasing until 18th of July. So once again, it's going to take place on Thursday, just like the forms of how it does it in not only Endless Ocean Luminous, but also with the forms of Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, and on top of that, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Switch Remake as well. So relatively speaking though, I get the strong sense of feeling is that the future Nintendo games was expected to be releasing on Thursdays nowadays. So because of that though, I'm just assuming about the fact that it's going to be releasing on every single Fridays, since In Journey Falls have been Princess Peach Showtime, but things change every nowadays, so I don't mind the forms of the change of days department when it comes to the forms of specifically Nintendo gaming releases during that specific time, because you get the idea what I was expecting for mentioning about that. So anyway, anyways, let's get to the forms of Blaze's gameplay style for Sonic Rush for a bit before I move on to a next conversation. And that's what appears to be about the fact that, as you can see, that every time when you do jump, that she actually just became like the forms of a flammable jump, because as far as I'm aware, she was lit with flames. So because of that though, yeah, it's actually pretty cool, like I said before, since her first ever debuted, although it's kind of unfortunate for the fact that after this game was released, that she does make a return from the likes of Sonic 06, despite the fact that the actual retconning for the story, and on top of that though, I will admit though, she's actually quite fun to play as well. Journey Falls have been Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, but as far as storytelling is concerned, my god, what have they done to her? But either way though, let's not talk about the forms of Sonic 06 for right now, because you know, we are still playing Sonic Rush after all. So because of that though, yeah, everything else will be pretty much accounted for basically. So yes, I will stress this enough as about the fact that yes indeed, I will mention about the forms of the boss names this time around for the majority of this playthrough anyway. So because of that though, just to want to let you know about the forms of what the bosses' names are. So anyways though, there's also another thing I want to point out as well, is that yes indeed, we somehow managed able to get yet another game has been announced just recently as well, also for about a week ago, and that's what appears to be none other than yet another Sonic game. And what game in question, you may ask exactly? Well, I'll tell you exactly what it is, and that's what appears to be none other than Sonic Rumble, which for quite a few days actually, is about the fact that they did somehow suggest a rumor about the fact that the actual specific game was originally going to call it Sonic Toys Party, but actually as it turns out, the name is officially being changed into Sonic Rumble. So no matter what though, just to make things a little bit more clear, rather than just trying to able to actually rip off the fonts that particular logo from Toy Story, or specifically with that particular kind of a lame title, which was originally going to call it back then. So thankfully though, they did come across into a different name, which I think is probably suitable for the better, because let me tell you, Sonic Rumble is just pretty good for that particular game's title as far as I'm concerned for the name. So either way though, I suppose that's what I can really think about that, I guess. So either way though, it is also worth noting for us about the fact that when it comes to Night Carnival, this will be the final time we can able to experiencing the stage, because as far as I'm aware, it's about the fact that obviously we don't have to worry about the forms of, you know, special stages anymore. So generally speaking, I was about the fact that also I just realized about something is that as soon as we play as Blaze right here, basically though, her music in the background sounds a little bit too differently this time around, because it was normally gonna be like do 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 kind of like notes tune or something, but apparently though we actually going to be listening into is the actual Blaze mixed version. So that's actually quite of a cool music change as far as I'm usually concerned. So either way though, and I was originally trying to able to mention about the fonts of specific songs for specific levels, but then again we'll talk more about that if we get on to the next part of this until specifically on Friday. So because of that though, yeah, everything else goes like pretty self-explanatory right here, except the fact that as soon as we dive right into the first boss in Blaze's playthrough, that you do realize about the fact that rather than fight against with Eggman Nega, so instead we were able to fight against with the one and only Dr. Eggman himself. So because of that though, it seems to be more specifically that Blaze, she's now going to be focusing on trying to deal with Eggman. So because of that though, although relatively speaking, I was about the fact that as far as I'm aware, that she's able to actually try to aim to collect some of these Soul Emeralds, which Soul Emeralds are basically the opposite Chaos Emeralds basically. So because of that though, yeah, you probably get the idea what I was expecting to mention about that. And it looks like, oh dear, Eggman is going to be using the Soul Emeralds to able to try to conquer the world. So yeah, we got to stop him. So yeah, nothing more I can say about that, I guess. I mean, sure enough though, it's about the fact that we have to go through exactly the same stages as before, except the fact that we're going to be faced off against with Dr. Eggman for the majority of certain bosses in Blaze the Cat's playthrough, basically. So anyway, so here we go into the Night Carnival boss, and this particular boss is going to be named the Egg Libra. So because of that though, yes, I did somehow looked up the forms of the Sonic Wiki just recently, so I can able to actually memorize the forms of this particular boss names, including future bosses here and there as well. So but either way though, for Egg Libra, basically though, is about the fact that all you have to do is basically you have to do the exactly the same technique as before, since in Sonic's story, for the fact that you can either just try to able to attack this little spiky ball thing if the electricity decides to run out, and you can able to actually just try to dip him down, and that way you can able to get an opportunity to able to attack him. And of course, every once in a while though, is about the fact that much like the forms within Sonic's playthrough, there was this random little turret thing decides to show up after doing a hit with Eggman or Eggman Nega, specifically in Sonic's playthrough, and no matter what though, you can able to actually end off the fight a lot quicker. So because of that though, yeah, you get the idea what I was expecting or something like that. So either way though, it seems to be more specifically, we're actually doing quite well actually for able to try to, you know, kick his butt no problem. So either way though, and also you do realize about the fact that certain bosses do have different color. So relatively speaking, that was actually quite a nice touch. So either way though, I apologize for that particular tongue twist in the end folks, because I will admit though right away, I am super pleased about the fact that we can able to actually get something for the sake of the forms of the second half of the year so far, when it comes to the forms of something Nintendo related. So either way though, oh yeah, every once in a while though, is that every time when you beat the boss for the first time in Blaze the Cat story, is that we're able to actually see this pretty cool cinematic scene where basically Blaze decides to able to do a little cool kick right there, right out of Eggman, and obviously though you're able to actually claim your Soul Emerald. So because of that though, and relatively speaking of, that's our first Soul Emerald we somehow obtained. So because of that though, in order to able to get all of these Soul Emeralds in her playthrough, basically though is about the fact that we have to defeat certain bosses. So because of that though, and like I said before, there's no need for special stage requirements. So yeah, it's a very self-explanatory setup. So either way though, now talking of which though actually, is about the fact that, oh, it looks like that we might able to actually meet up with the forms of a familiar character coming up, but either way though, oh look, there's Cream and Cheese. So something tells me about the fact that Cream and Cheese will be our navigator throughout the majority of Blaze's story basically. So because of that though, and generally speaking, it's about the fact that that is how both Blaze and Cream has been introduced to each other. So either way though, despite the fact that Blaze doesn't really know of what's going on. So either way though. Anyways, back onto the forms of that particular subject for the sake of the forms of Nintendo World Championships NES Edition that recently has been announced since in about a week ago. And as far as I'm aware, it did somehow manage able to contain well, let's get to the forms of the actual content of how this game actually plays out to be. Apparently though, it plays very similar to the forms of how it does it on both NES Remix 1 as well as NES Remix 2, except the noticeable differences this time is that rather than having ourselves with a 3-star ranking system, including the rainbow stars as well, and relatively speaking we're actually going to a similar ranking system as the forms of how it does it for the majority of the Sonic games, yes, including Sonic Origins as well. So generally speaking, not too surprising for this one right there, but as far as I'm aware, they were able to actually contain, let's just say, a grand total of 13 games into that particular compilation game, and those games in questioning are Balloon Fight, Donkey Kong, Excite Bike, Ice Climber, Kid Icarus, Kirby's Adventure, Metroid, Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. 2, Super Mario Bros. 3, Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, The Legend of Zelda, and finally Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link. And as far as the game selection is concerned, I'm perfectly fine with this, especially concerning for the fact that at least I don't have to worry about with the forms of some frustrating challenges for the majority of NES Remix 1. Yeah, I'm looking at you with the forms of Blue Clue Land, and especially noticeable with the forms of Pinball as well, because I'm pretty much useless when it comes to able to experiencing those two games in particular back in the forms within NES Remix 1. I'm sure that you probably already know that ever since in our playthrough of NES Remix 1 back in 2018, thanks to Mario and such. So because of that though, yeah, we've met again with the forms of Vanilla right here. So because of that though, just to like double check on Cream and what have you. So yeah, it's actually pretty swell. And I'm afraid to tell you it's about the fact that this will be the final time we're going to be seeing Vanilla in this game in particular, because as far as I'm aware, we have not seen Vanilla for after the events of Sonic Rush or something, even though it's a bit hard to tell because it has been about 2 days ago since I actually have last played this game for sure. So either way though, and yeah, and as far as I'm aware, it's about the fact that I believe in terms of how many challenges they somehow got in that particular NES World Championships NES edition, I believe it will actually contain 150 challenges. So because of that though, I'm not exactly sure if it's like a lot compared to the forms of how it does it on NES Remix 1 as well as NES Remix 2, but as far as I'm aware, it's like a successor to NES Remix 1 as well as NES Remix 2. So because of that though, yeah, I'm very excited about this, and as far as I'm aware, yes indeed, they somehow have the physical version, but here's the catch though, it's about the fact that much like the forms of how it does it on certain collector's editions for certain Nintendo Switch games for sure, that it will actually able to reveal the special edition version, and as far as I'm aware, it does manage to able to contain the forms of, let's just say, quite a number of items actually, if you manage to able to go after Nintendo World Championships NES Edition for Deluxe Set, will obviously contains not only the physical version of the game, but also with 5 collectible pins, as well as 13 art cards featuring the forms of respective games, And on top of all that stuff, though, it also includes the Fable Gold colored NES game pack, which, by the way, is for display only. And yeah, I guess that's all I can really say about that, I guess. So either way, though. And there's also another thing I want to point out as well, is about the fact that recently, what I've also noticed is that there is yet another compilation game called Rocket Knight Adventures, in some cases Rocket Knight Adventures Re-Sparked. That's been confirmed for its release date as well, and that's going to be due out at some point on the 11th of June. So because of that though, there's quite a lot of releases that's been going on for not only for Nintendo Switch, but also with multiple platforms here and there as well, for PlayStation, as well as Xbox and all that stuff. So yeah, you get the idea for that point. So anyways, here we go now on to Zone 2, and we're going back into Leaf Storm. So because of that though, it's been a very long while, hasn't it? Especially noticeable that, you know, ever since in Sonic's playthrough, that obviously that was the first stage you were able to jump right into. And yes, I do recognize the song, by the way, for the sake of Leaf Storm. That's what appears to be right there, right on. Which, funnily enough though, it able to actually brought back in not only for the likes of the forms of, I would say, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games or something, but it's also with Super Smash Bros. Brawl, as well as the forms of, I would say Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games, in addition to London 2012 Olympic Games as well, and you probably named the rest of it though. So because of that though, because yeah, I do recognize the actual lyrics and stuff like that, like, right there, right on, right there, right on, kind of vibes to it. So either way though, I was quite surprised about the fact that the second zone is actually a lot easier compared to the forms of how it does it on the first zone in Blaze's playthrough so far, which I know for a fact that the difficulty is a bit screwy for the most part. I mean, honestly though, it's about the fact that I still classify for saying that the hardest zone in the entire game, it still has to be Altitude's Limit, mainly because it reminds me of so much of Sky Canyon from Sonic Advance 2 in my opinion, but that's the way how I feel about it anyway. So anyway. And also, as far as I'm aware, is that the actual boost effect for Blaze the Cat was actually by the forms of the fire boost, which it does look pretty cool. And as far as I'm aware, she can able to actually perform some pretty cool tricks here and there, like for instance with this particular little jump thing right there as you saw earlier. That way, it actually gives you the opportunity to able to go to the alternative pathways that normally Sonic cannot reach. And on top of all that stuff though, she does also perform a fast little quick dash from side to side or something. So relatively speaking, though, it's about the fact that I would classify for saying that Blaze the Cat is often considered to be the easy mode of this whole entire game. Well, don't expect too much though, because obviously though, depending on what difficulty option you select, that obviously though, this is still normal mode after all. So this means about the fact that you're still able to actually fight bosses within 8 hits. So no matter what though, it's about the fact that, well, wish me luck, I guess, when it comes to dealing with rematches with the forms of certain bosses, except the fact that, like I said before, that Dr. Eggman is not going to take over for certain bosses that we have experienced before, except the fact that it's being controlled by Eggman Nega, basically, which is basically a recolor of Dr. Eggman, and obviously that Eggman Nega is basically the opposite Dr. Eggman. Like, obviously, though, that was basically Blaze's main enemy when it comes to dealing with that particular stuff, despite the fact that Blaze, so far, hasn't come across to Eggman Nega just yet. So, anyways, though, when it comes to everything else I could possibly explain about this, is that, well, when it comes to the forms of Sonic Rumble, as I mentioned this before, that obviously though, it has been confirmed for its release date slightly, but it's going to be available at some point in winter for, I don't know, by the end of this year, or in the earliest point in 2025. So because of that though, yeah, and I think fundamentally speaking, they did somehow suggest the actual beta test version of the game. So in some cases though, for those of you who want to experience that particular game earlier, just before the actual game comes out, for specifically for smartphones or something like that. So because of that though, still it is a bit weird about the fact that every nowadays about the fact that we might come across into a lot of mobile exclusives for certain Sonic games these days, including with the forms of, well, you know what I'm saying, with the forms of Sonic Dream Team, but either way, beggars can't be choosers, I guess. So here we go, on to the second boss fight in Blaze the Cat story, and this boss is actually known as the Egg Hammer Mega. So yeah, it's why I classified that for that particular name, by the way. So then again though, because I did a massive research on the specific boss names in particular, so I'm only going to be mentioning about the fact that if Eggman is the only one takes control with certain bosses, not counting the forms of Eggman Nega, by the way, because as far as I'm aware, well, despite the fact that you fight exactly the same bosses as before, with no changes or anything else like that. And also, as far as I'm aware, is about the fact that, for I can tell, that if you press the jump button in the mid-air as Blaze, and if you try to press the R button, she can able to perform a hover ability, so that way you'll make the entire platforming segment a lot easier. So because of that though, that'll come in handy though, especially noticeable whenever we go back onto Altitude's Limit at some point. Oh boy, that'll be a piece of cake with Blaze the Cat this time around, because normally in Sonic's playthrough, that obviously there was no way it'll make the entire platforming segment a lot easier or something. So either way though, yeah, that's as far as I can try to able to explain about that. I suppose technically the final thing I want to mention about is that recently the Nintendo Switch app, for specifically Nintendo Switch Online app, has recently received a brand new version update, specifically version 2.10.0, even though despite the fact that I for some reason no longer have that app anymore. Oh, and speaking of something relates to Cream the Rabbit, basically she decides able to watch you during the forms of the actual boss fight, if you couldn't tell from the bottom screen. And yes, I did somehow manage to point things out for the sake of time. Yes, indeed, I finally managed to able to unlock Drama Cream for the sake of the forms of Sonic Dash recently. So, I believe next up I'm about to be unlocking, for the sake of Sonic Dash anyway, and that's what appears to be none other than Metal Sonic version 3.0 for sure. So because of that though, yeah, I'm very excited to able to actually get my chance to able to unlock Metal Sonic version 3.0 until specifically next week or so, or should I say 5 days for now. So because of that though, yeah, I'm very optimistic about that. So anyway, and it looks like no matter what though, we'll be seeing the exactly the same cutscene as before, except this time around though, it's only focusing on Blaze's perspective, like she's now running through the actual forest and stuff like that, and as a result we somehow claim ourselves the second Soul Emerald, so we've only got 5 more left. So, and I believe if I recall correctly, if you try to fight against with the exactly same boss as before, I believe you get the exactly similar cutscene as in Sonic's story, like it did say like, you'll regret this and stuff like that, and you're just standing there and just watch him just run away. So yeah, that's as far as I can think about it. And look at that, I got myself my glorious S rank, so that's actually pretty top notch. So with that being said folks, is that we get endings off this point right here. So join me next time for more Let's Play of Sonic Rush in Blaze's story. And that's what it appears to be about the fact that we go into Zone 3. And that's what it appears to be Mirage Road. So that will be pretty similar for that regard. So I'll see you guys until on Friday. Later fellas.